picturesque mountains, heavenly beaches, rare species of animals, amazing architecture and rich history, the poorest slums, long-lasting civil wars, the largest drug trafficking, and the gap between the poor and the rich. And all this is about her, about Colombia. Colombians consider their country the most beautiful in the world. And there really is something to catch the eye. The largest cities, Bogotá, Cali, and Medellín, can boast their location inside the leafy mountains. Cartagena and Barranquilla, with views of the Caribbean Sea, Cano Cristales. The Crystal River, or as the locals call it, the River of Five Colors, is considered one of the most beautiful in the world. It combines yellow, blue, green, black, and red hues. And the reason for such a riot of colors is the flowering water plants. And this is Ciudad Perdida, or the Lost City, which is hidden in the jungles of northern Colombia. It was founded by the Indians in the distant past and is undeservedly overlooked. Tourists usually look at Machu Picchu. 2 hours drive from Medellín is the beautiful town of Guatapé. In the entire town, you won't find 2 identical houses. Each is painted in its own unique style, including the administrative building. Even the local tuk-tuk transport, used for transporting tourists, is covered with bright patterns. Next to the town is the El Peñón de Guatapé rock, once a place of worship for the Indians. You can climb this 220-meter stone via a staircase. True, you will have to sweat because there are as many as 740 steps. Of incredible beauty. The nature of Colombia is filled with exotic species of animals. 4-legged anteater, Andean bear, rock pigeons, Amazon river dolphin, butterfly, 8,988, red-winged chachalaca, terrifying leaf climber, giant arapaima, scarlet ibis, horned screamer. You can encounter all sorts of creatures here. Various species of hummingbirds can be found even in megacities. A distinctive feature of Colombia is coffee, which is also the main agricultural crop. The local climate is ideal for growing this invigorating drink. The volcanic soil is fertile, the sun is gentle, it does not scorch the fruits and leaves of coffee trees. As a result, the grains ripen evenly and the coffee becomes rich with a pronounced aroma. Unlike Brazil, where huge coffee plantations are processed by machines, unripe grains can get in, which give a bitter taste. In Colombia, the harvest and processing are done manually as the grains ripen. That's why Colombian coffee is valued for its great quality and is considered the most expensive in the world. Coffee export is a major part of the national income for the country. Created back in 1927, the Federation of Colombian Coffee Growers prohibits the export of beans under the brand coffee from Colombia without passing quality control. If the check is passed, then the packaging is marked with such a trademark, with the image of the fictional farmer Juan Valdez, who is the collective image of a typical coffee farmer from Colombia. One of the symbols of the capital Bogotá is the monument to Simón Bolívar, the legendary general who brought Colombia independence from the Spanish Empire. The general liberated much of South America, including Colombia, becoming a national hero in Venezuela, Peru, and Ecuador. Bogotá, like all cities in Colombia, is divided into zones from the 1st to the 6th, respectively, from the poorest to the richest. In the first zone, people live in shanties, very poor, but they are free from taxes and utility payments. Prices in stores are the lowest in the city. Higher zone numbers indicate better living standards, but also come with increased taxes, prices, and utility costs. Thus, residents of wealthy zones pay for life in the poor ones. Their own kind of Colombian socialism, as they say here. The higher up in the mountains, the worse the living conditions. Shanty towns arose spontaneously. For the most part, they are self-built on the slopes of mountains, in cities where land costs less. That's why shanty towns grew up there. In the center of Bogotá, there is a very instructive law for any city in the world. If the building owner maintains its historical exterior, does not spoil the facade with white glass packets, does not plaster advertising, then he is completely exempt from taxes. In Medellín, Colombia's second largest city, there is a metro system, but no subways in the capital. The main public transport in the capital are buses with special platforms. In Medellín, the metro runs underground. They decided to connect the slums on the slopes of the mountains with the city center by a cable car, from which, if desired, a tourist can see what the slums look like without risking his life. and the Indians and the Spanish conquistadors and the black slaves had a significant influence on the culture of Colombia, including painting, literature, and music. Colombians do not regret European music. Most often on the streets or in clubs they play something local: salsa, cumbia, vallenato. The most popular music among young people is reggaeton, something like Latin American hip-hop. Reggaeton in Colombia literally sounds from every corner. The lyrics of the songs are often very explicit and filled with slang. Cali, the third largest city, is called the salsa capital of the world. Salsa, the most popular Latin American dance, means spicy sauce. This fiery, passionate Latin American dance can be seen and heard in numerous salsa clubs scattered throughout the city. The local cuisine is very diverse, with a huge amount of fruits like mango, papaya, guava, lulo, granadilla, pineapple, prickly pear, passion fruit, and many others. There's a lot of unusual street food, for example, arepas, cheese pancakes or empanadas, pastries with various fillings, or even chicharrón, chips made from pig skin. And locals are also quite averse to carcinogens. Everywhere they sell heavily roasted sausages, meat and chicken. In 2023, one of the most famous Colombian artists, Fernando Botero, passed away. His unusual style of drawing everyone and everything fat came to be called Boterism. About his work, Fernando said, "There should be a lot of a good person," and added with a sad smile, "Well, and a bad one too." That's how Botero saw Mona Lisa. This picture is called The Catch. Even the guitar didn't escape the roundness, and that's how Botero saw himself. He was not only an artist, but also a sculptor. If the Chizik Pizik from St. Petersburg fell into the hands of Fernando, it would look like this. Colombia is the world leader in emerald exports, accounting for 80% of the market. The real revolution in emerald mining only began in the 70s of the last century, when private individuals took over the exploration of deposits. However, with their value and demand beyond the border, Colombian emeralds have created a huge illegal trade niche. To this day, a continuous flow of millions of dollars fills the pockets of criminal groups. But emeralds are small pebbles in the criminal crown. Everyone knows about the real diamond. And its name is cocaine, and of course it would be foolish not to remember the one whose second name is the king of cocaine, Pablo Escobar. By the end of the 80s, 80% of the cocaine distributed worldwide was under his control. He owned a fortune of $30 billion. In the late 80s, Escobar was so engrossed in his criminal career that he ended up on the 7th line of the magazine's rating and was only removed from there after his death. Pablo grew up in a poor family near Medellin. In this city he formed his first gang, which was involved in car theft. Then there was racketeering and even kidnapping. By his early 20s, Escobar had earned the reputation of the biggest criminal authority in Medellin. It was then that he first started trading cocaine. Pablo quickly secured the top position in the cocaine industry in Colombia and then in all of South America. Every batch of cocaine that was exported from Colombia was under the control of the drug baron. He taxed all shipments with a special tax, but at the same time guaranteed their delivery. Flying over Colombia in a plane, one might think that it is almost entirely covered with dense, untouched jungles. But it was in them that Pablo hid his laboratories for the production of the white substance. In 1977, Escobar became the founder of the Medellin cartel, which lasted in total for 17 years. The cartel was governed by a simple principle: pay or die. If you thought that such a small country like Colombia could consume so much cocaine, then you are mistaken. The main buyer was not in Colombia, not even in South American countries. Most of the export went to the United States. It was there at the beach parties in Miami that wealthy Americans increased Pablo Escobar's dollar account. But until now, the United States government has been turning a blind eye to this problem. The time came when Escobar's ties with Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega were exposed. Noriega's personality perfectly fits the proverbial phrase, to sit on two chairs, but in Manuel's case there were far more chairs. In the 60s, he collaborated with the CIA, becoming the main supplier of information on South America, as well as an illegal arms supplier for the fight against the Red Partisans. Then he saw a great advantage in becoming a friend of Escobar and helping him with cocaine supplies. He did not overlook the Cuban communists, who became a thorn in his side. Escobar's links to Nariño were revealed, finally drawing attention from the United States of America. Apparently, only such a reason interested Ronald Reagan, who was always talking about the Red Threat. In his speech, he announced the start of a social campaign against drugs called Just Say No. Since then, the states have been actively cooperating with the capture of Colombian drug barons, sponsoring Colombian special forces, and sending their agents to fight drugs. But capturing Escobar was not easy. He owned 30 estates and a whole network of informants who timely reported on the approaching threat. In his native Medellin, Pablo received wide support from the local poor from the slums, of which there were plenty in the city. With the dirty cocaine money, he built houses for the poor, asking nothing in return. Pablo also built many football fields. Since he was a big fan of football himself, he even became a sponsor of the Atlético Nacional team, seeing an additional way to launder money in the team. Considering himself a Colombian Robin Hood, Escobar aimed as high as no drug baron in the world. He seriously decided to become the president of Colombia. Pablo knew that the poor people, to whom he literally gave money, built housing, schools, and hospitals, would support him in his political ambitions. In 1982, the Colombian government signed an agreement with the United States of America for the extradition of captured drug barons to American prisons. And Pablo directly said, "I would rather lie in a grave in Colombia than sit in a prison in the United States of America." He proposed to the government to repeal the law, promising to pay off the country's entire foreign debt, a measly $10 billion, but was refused. Nothing was left but to act by political means. In the same year of 1982, Escobar triumphantly passed the Congress of Colombia. In 32 years, he became a substitute congressman. That is, he gained the right to vote in the absence of a deputy. Cocaine money, popularity among the people, and connections at the top did their job. The farmer's son seriously aimed for the presidential post. Even in Colombia, there were individuals who stood up to the drug lords. Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla launched a campaign against Escobar and managed to get Pablo disgracefully expelled from Congress. Escobar's political career was forever broken. He had to forget about the presidential chair. Hating to lose and accustomed to acting by bloody methods, Escobar responded with terror. His people shot Bonilla, special groups, called, dealt with officials, journalists, police across the country. Escobar even made contact with left-wing partisans, ensuring their capture of the Justice Palace in the capital. Tanks were brought into the city. As a result of the bloody battle, about 100 people died, including 11 of the most intransigent judges. And in the ensuing fire, all the documents for the extradition of members of the Medellin cartel burned in a surprising way. The war declared by the cartel on the government lasted 9 years. Colombian secret police officers were liquidating or arresting Escobar's closest associates one by one. In retaliation, the bandits launched a series of terrorist attacks. Every day, dozens of people across the country were dying at the hands of the cartel's fighters. The cartel's special emphasis was on car bombings. On the 18th of August, killers shot presidential candidate Luis Carlos Galán, who had promised to end the cocaine trade. In November, Escobar's people committed a horrific act of terrorism. They blew up a passenger plane in mid-air, which was supposed to be carrying the future president of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, Gabriel Trujillo. All 110 people on board were killed, but Trujillo was not among them. The Colombian Robin Hood became a terrorist in the 90s, and when Trujillo became president, he offered the drug barons a deal to surrender, promising not to extradite them to the United States of America. By that time, Escobar began to realize that he was losing the war. Against him united the army and special services, competing drug cartels, CIA operatives, and ultra-right fighters. Relatives of those killed by his bandits created the organization Los Pepes, a death squad that killed everyone who was associated with Escobar. A special search group was hunting for Pablo himself, where the best of the best from the army and police were selected, and Pablo Escobar surrendered. But of course not like ordinary convicts. Don Pablo agreed to admit his guilt in several insignificant crimes and go to jail for 5 years on the condition that his past sins would be forgiven. and also with one small but very important agreement that he would serve his term in a prison built by himself. A huge complex called La Catedral, located in the mountains not far from his native Medellin, resembled more a luxurious mansion with a bar, disco, pool, sauna, and football field. Escobar could receive any visitors he wished, and he himself left the walls of La Catedral whenever he wanted and as much as he wanted. The prison guards were mainly occupied with protecting Escobar from those who were eager to deal with him. From prison, Pablo ran his cocaine empire, issuing orders about dealing with competitors, some of whom he even executed himself. A year later, the government's patience ran out, and President Trujillo ordered Escobar to be removed from La Catedral and put into a real cell. But Escobar was warned in time, and he again slipped away from real justice. However, this did not last long. The enraged government used all means to get the drug baron. In December of '93, special services intercepted a call from Escobar to his son and determined the location of the fugitive cartel leader. The house where he was hiding was surrounded by special forces. Pablo Escobar fired back, then tried to escape through the roof, but was killed by a sniper. The epical event did not go unnoticed, and Fernando Botero. 15,000 people gathered for Pablo Escobar's funeral. Some mourned the Colombian Robin Hood, who was made famous by popular talk for his good-hearted fight against the oligarchs. Some came to reconcile with the former boss, on whose conscience were about 4,000 lives. Many say that as much as Escobar hated the Colombian government, terrorizing ordinary civilians, he loved his family just as much. Just one detail. When the war between the drug lords and the government was nearing its end, and Pablo and his family were moving from one house to another to hide, at one point they were in a house with a fireplace, but there was no firewood, and it was getting cold outside. Escobar, without thinking, threw $2 million into the fireplace and lit them. For the crimes of the head of the family of the drug kingpin paid a hefty price. The wife was left a widow, and their 2 children were deprived of a loving father at the ages of 14 and 9. They still suffer from a heavy emotional burden and constant threats from people who have directly or indirectly suffered at the hands of the sadly notorious drug baron. In addition, they lost all the money that was confiscated and handed over to the Colombian authorities. Pablo's son Sebastian denied or simply did not want to believe in his father's death from a sniper's bullet. He claimed that Escobar had ended his own life, finding himself in a hopeless situation. The drug problem remains one of the main issues for Colombia today. It's better not to joke about this topic with Colombians. It will offend them. In the 80s, when Escobar's drug empire was at the peak of its power, he literally didn't know where to put the money. One of his non-cocaine projects was a personal zoo. Giraffes, rhinoceroses, antelopes, an elephant, and ponies lived at the Hacienda Napoles Villa with the drug baron. And there were also 4 huge hippopotamuses living here. When the hacienda was raided by government forces in 1993, the animals were relocated and sent to legal zoos. All except for the hippopotamuses. These gave a bigger kick than Escobar's henchmen, which is why the hippos were called cocaine hippos. Catching them was too expensive, so they were simply released into the local jungles. Now the hippos have multiplied, settled in the Magdalena River basin, and are expanding their territory. They have literally occupied the water bodies along the river's flow, and this is already a potential ecological threat. The hippos have begun to displace local species. Manatees and lamantines have already left their usual habitats. The situation is complicated by the fact that hippos are territorially egoistic animals and, from a scientific point of view, are born ecosystem engineers. They, like beavers, have a fairly radical impact on the surrounding nature. Hippos feed on land but defecate in water, thereby moving nutrients from the banks to the rivers and ponds. Deficiency in one place, replenishment in another. The chemical composition of water bodies changes. They grow green faster and turn into a clogged swamp. Fish there, as you can guess, either die out or are replaced by other species. Hippos use their tusks to dig trenches and canals, reshaping their environment as they see fit, all without any oversight or direction of predators. What to do with half-ton living excavators is unclear. The government for some time thought about simply catching them one by one and sterilizing them. However, catching just one small chrome baby behemoth cost about $25,000. And a mass of human forces, too expensive, difficult, and senseless. It's easier to just endure. Moreover, behemoths are gradually disappearing in Africa, and Colombia could become a life-saving alternative and a reserve for them. That's how Pablo Escobar became, perhaps, the most unexpected reason for the appearance of an invasive species in Colombia. Another bloody page in the history of Colombia was turned in the year 1948. Then began an armed conflict, the cause of which was the opposition of the liberal and conservative parties. This period entered history under the name La Violencia and lasted for 10 years. In the story about Escobar, we mentioned the militarized radical groups several times. Do you think they stayed in the past? Not quite. One of the most famous revolutionary armed forces of Colombia from the Spanish Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia is still functioning and fighting. It consists of up to 20,000 people. It was formed in 1964 as the military wing of the country's Communist Party. Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia members with weapons in their hands fought for the creation of a state of social justice and social equality. The group funded its activities in an interesting way. In 1982, at the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia Partisan Conference, they came up with the idea of levying a revolutionary tax on major cocaine producers. Colombians called them narco-partisans. As a tool to pressure the government, they used terrorist attacks, assaults on police stations, and kidnappings. In their time, they even managed to take presidential candidates hostage. Ingrid Betancourt. Overall, they didn't differ much in methods from Pablo Escobar. The government forces regularly tried to clear the jungle of partisans, using both heavy artillery and bombers in military operations. Nevertheless, the rebels still control about 20% of Colombia's territory. Since 1964, more than 220,000 Colombians have died in ongoing conflicts, many of them civilians. Only in 2016 did the government sign a peace agreement with the rebel leadership in Havana, Cuba. As you understood, Colombia is a colorful country with stunning nature, interesting history, and sometimes very harsh. What future awaits this country? Can Colombians shake off the heavy burden of drug trafficking and civil wars? Only time will tell.